chat. We want to see where you're all from. This is one of my favorite parts of these webinars is
Durango, Colorado. Man, I lived there as a child. Fantastic.
Turkey, Sweden, Billings, Kingsman, Boston, Calgary, San Francisco, Windsor, Utah,
Zagreb, Croatia,
Ottawa, Vancouver, India, Northampton, Toronto, Fort Worth, Appleton, Berlin, Germany, Switzerland, Slovenia.
Fantastic. Slovenia. That's a beautiful country.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead and take just a second to appreciate how global this webinar is. We've got a lot of countries, a lot of places in this world represented. So thank you everyone for joining us today to talk about psychological safety. I would like to know, how many of you have been on a LeaderFactor webinar in the past? Go ahead and put a yes in chat. Ooh, yeah, that's what I love to see. Lots of yeses here. If you're with us for the first time, welcome. If you're coming back, thank you for coming again. We love doing these webinars. We do them about once a month, and I have to say, it's probably one of my favorite times every single month to interact with all of you. So thank you for taking some time out of your day to be with us. The next thing I would love to see is go ahead and put something that you're grateful for this week in the chat. Something that happened this week or something that just is that you're grateful for. We want to look at a couple of these. Rain. Hey, we're in Utah. We got a little bit of rain this week that we're grateful for. We're in a drought.
Yes. Yeah.
Health and family.
The beauty of spring.
Michael, playing with my grandson. Lance, soccer. Gail, sunshine. JM, life. That's it. I love that. Can't argue there. Kelly, family. Katie, my team being open and vulnerable in feedback with me.
Wow.
Fantastic. Lori, the first summer-like day. Laura, my dog. New career opportunities that we're breathing. Grateful for my parents celebrating 60 years of marriage. Sabrina, wow. That is pretty cool. 60 years is a long time. Whose dog turned 13? Gabriella's dog turned 13. That's pretty good.
My awesome 5-year-old.
Your awesome 5-year-old. Hey, we've got a lot to be grateful for this week. So thank you everybody for participating in that. We want to go through just a couple housekeeping items. So just a reminder, please don't share your LinkedIn profile or any distracting comments in the chat. We want to keep the chat super clean and very relevant so that we get the most benefit. So
we're going to record it, right, Junior? We're recording it.
Yes, we are recording this, and we've got several moderators on all of the platforms, just making sure that everything is going swimmingly. So don't be surprised if you start detracting from the experience, you'll probably be removed. So just want to point that out. Okay, so today we are talking about psychological safety, specifically the 4 stages of psychological safety and what that has to do with nice cultures. So the book just turned 1. We had our first birthday. So if you have read the book, please leave us a review on Amazon. Let us know what you think. If you haven't read the book yet, please pick it up. We know that you will enjoy it. If you've read the book and you liked the book, go ahead and put in the chat something that you liked about the book, one of your takeaways, just so we can see what you're liking about the book and how you're engaging with it. Dr. Timothy R. Clark is the author of the 4 stages of psychological safety, and he's with us today and will be facilitating our conversation. He is an Oxford-trained social scientist, and he is the CEO and founder of LeaderFactor. We are so grateful, Tim, to have you here with us. Thank you for spending some time with us today.
Oh, I'm grateful to be here. This is going to be fun. Today's topic is such an important topic. I'm so excited to dive into it with you.
We're excited too. Before we begin, I wanted to just take 30 seconds and tell you about LeaderFactor's mission. Not everybody knows about LeaderFactor's mission. Our mission is to influence the world for good at scale. That is why our organization exists. It is why we do these webinars. It is why we write books and publications and do all of the things that we do. So thank you for being part of that. This allows us to get our content out into the world, and psychological safety, as you know, the world desperately needs. So if you're interested in psychological safety, this is the place to be. So Tim, go ahead and tell us what we're going to be talking about today.
We're going to be talking about the catastrophic consequences of a nice culture. Now, isn't that an interesting topic?
Sure is.
So what we're saying is that nice is not always nice. And so here's the agenda. So we have five items on the agenda. What is a dangerously nice culture? So what is that? And what industries tend to be nice or not so nice? And you'll see these groupings and be able to respond and react to that. There are natural groupings that tend to be nice and some industries and sectors that tend to be not so nice. And then why do organizations pursue niceness? What's their motivation? Fourth, how can a nice culture become catastrophic? Now, that's a pretty strong word, but we're using that word quite deliberately. That can happen, and we're going to talk about how that happens. And then finally, how do you fix a dangerously nice culture? If you're cultivating this kind of culture, what do you do? How do you change that direction, that path? Okay, so let's jump into it, Junior.
Let's do it.
First item, what is a dangerously nice culture? So let's talk about this. A dangerously nice culture is the veneer of civility. Think about that. It's a cute nod to psychological safety. It is a hologram that falsely signals collaboration, right? Think about cultures that develop this way, where nice it's just a thin layer, right? Now, here's what we often see with organizations like this. In many make nice cultures, leaders have simply spread a thin layer of nice over a thick layer of fear. They layer on niceness as a patina, a coat on the top. It's like putting a coat of paint to cover dysfunction and give the appearance of harmony and alignment. So we're just sharing these points of definition with you. Now, let's ask a question, Junior. Let's pull this question down for everyone. This is a polling question. So this question asks, have you ever worked in a dangerously nice culture where niceness got in the way of engagement, accountability, and performance?
I love this question. So you should see that on your screen. If you're on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook, go ahead and just make a comment here. Have you ever worked in a dangerously nice culture where niceness got in the way of engagement, accountability, and performance? We've got tons of responses rolling in. I love doing these polls because we get hundreds and hundreds right off the bat. So I'll go ahead and open this for about another 5 seconds, and then we'll close it out. Any guesses in the chat? What do you think that this is going to be? How many yeses do you think we're going to get?
This is fascinating.
It sure is.
Really fascinating. So we thought that this theme was hugely important, and the results to this polling question confirm that this absolutely is a pattern. So Junior, do you want to talk about the results a little bit?
Yep. So I just shared those. And for those of you who can't see, we've got 82% of you that said yes and 18% that said no. And it's important to understand we're not looking at a sample size of just a few dozen. We have, I think, well over 1,000 people on this webinar across all platforms, maybe several thousand. So this is very significant. 82% of you have worked in a dangerously nice culture where niceness got in the way.
That's pretty incredible. So it is a pervasive pattern. It is an area of quicksand. It's an area that we can get into if we're not careful. And that's what we're going to talk about today is why do we get into it and what do we do? And think more about the consequences, right? The not only the immediate consequences, but the second and third order consequences as well. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's talk about industries or sectors of society that tend to be nice versus those that tend to be not so nice. So those that have a nice tradition historically include education, healthcare, government, nonprofits, and voluntary associations. Now let's ask the question, why do these sectors or these industries tend to have a nice tradition? Why? What is it about these sectors of society or industries that perpetuates that nice tradition.
Everyone is
think about that.
Right on the money here in the chat.
So what are they saying, Junior?
So Jared says values. Tori Shauna says because they're people focused. Laceland says service related. Jared says mission. Nikki says value driven work. So you're all over the bullseye on this one.
Yeah.
When we're talking about organizations that have benevolent missions, this is where we see the dominant pattern, right, Tim?
Yes. And so there's a cluster. This is the nice cluster.
Yeah.
The cluster of industries or sectors of society that their culture emanates from what Junior said, from that benevolent mission and purpose in the first place. Right? I mean, so it naturally springs from that mission, from that tradition, from those values. And it's not a surprise, but it can be dangerous. And that's what we're going to talk about. It can be dangerous. You can go to a place where that strength becomes a weakness. Now, on the other side of the ledger, we have other industries and sectors of society that have a not so nice tradition. So we have a not so nice cluster. And so let's ask the same question, Junior, to everybody in the chat. Why? Okay, so which ones are they? The military, law enforcement, and other paramilitary organizations, manufacturing, construction, engineering. Why do these organizations have maybe a not so nice tradition, maybe a little harder edge? What do we got, Junior?
Quick execution. Laura says hierarchy. Douglas, metric driven. Risks are high. Compliance. Christiane says that. Susie, safety is affected. They're profit driven. They're old school, focused on business and the bottom line. Mm-hmm. We've got Angie says outcome focused. Elaine, power based relationships. Obey direct orders. Power driven. Result oriented. So you can start to see the pattern and the theme associated with these not so nice.
Yeah. So can you see the differences between the nice cluster and the not so nice cluster, and why we have the cultural traditions that we have between the two? It's not by chance that we have these differences. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about a case study that I think is really quite fascinating. So we worked with a biotechnology firm. And they would fit into the nice category, the nice cluster. They came from a benevolent mission. They had a mission to preserve patient safety. And that nurtured compassion and empathy in the culture. Now that's wonderful. Those are attributes, those are characteristics that we would all want to have and that we need to have. But then it went too far. And that compassion and empathy mutated into a nice culture that drove truth-telling underground. Now think about that. So the compassion and empathy was there, and that's fantastic. But somehow that got twisted. It got distorted. It got mutated into this dangerously nice culture that drove truth-telling underground. And it has since put the very organization at risk because of all the consequences, right? What happens when you can't do truth telling? What happens to the meeting, Junior? What happens to a meeting? In meetings, what do people do? So let's go ahead.
What do people think they do? What happens in those types of meetings?
What happens in meetings in this kind of an organization?
The meeting after the meeting, Sabrina, you hit it right on the head.
That's it.
People don't show up. The meeting happens in the hallway. Absence of trust, dysfunction of the team. There's no challenging, silence, IMs. Yep, I hear that. Yeah. Disdain. People are afraid to speak. Social loafing, gossip. They're stagnant. Bobbleheads. Bobbleheads. I love that one.
But do you see all of these adverse consequences, these unintended consequences that happen when the culture mutates in the wrong way? We distort what compassion and empathy really are about. And at that point, you know what? The niceness is not kind anymore. Niceness is not kindness. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, so why do organizations pursue niceness? Let's talk about some of these reasons. Junior, do you want to take us through some of these reasons?
Yeah, to gain approval and reward by avoiding conflict, to avoid punishment or retaliation, to show deference to the chain of command, to provide the lubrication to solve problems, to replace genuine inclusion. We see organizations do this all the time.
So let's bring down a polling question on this one, Junior, and let's see if we can gather some feedback. These are the primary reasons that we have found that organizations pursue niceness that can become dangerous.
So you'll see that poll. You'll see that poll. And just to reiterate, the question is your organization motivated to pursue niceness? If so, which of these is the biggest motivation?
Okay.
And then we've got those 5 options.
Yeah,
these are interesting results so far.
Very, very interesting results. Please vote. Please answer this question, because we do want to understand the pattern, and we have a very, very big sample size. And so this will be fascinating to understand what you are experiencing in your own organization.
Yep. Okay, we're at about 60%. We'll let this keep going for a few more seconds, and then we'll close it out. So if you haven't had a chance to contribute, go ahead and do that. And we definitely want your contribution on all the platforms. So if you're on LinkedIn, make sure and comment as well. Okay, I'm going to go and end this, and then I'll share the results with you. Okay.
Fantastic.
We've got 42% of you said that the reason was to gain approval by avoiding conflict. And that was overwhelmingly the highest answer that we got, by about 30%. Relative to the others. So we have an outstanding winner there.
We do. So I want you to think about this, reflect on these findings here. But you can see that the other reasons are legitimate. Well, they're not necessarily legitimate, but they are reasons that organizations pursue niceness. And many of you are acknowledging these other reasons, right? So there, and you can have more than one motivation, but the purpose of this question is to identify the chief motivation. Okay, fantastic. So let's press forward and let's talk about the catastrophic consequences of a nice culture. We have been able to identify 5 based on our research and our work with clients around the world. So let's go through these. Junior, take us through the first one here.
First one is crisis response. Inertia becomes so strong in a nice culture that the organization loses its ability to act preemptively. It waits, in other words, until we have a crisis. And at that point, in most cases, it's too late. It deflects reality until a problem becomes too big to ignore. So there's not a lot of prevention going on. There's not a lot of preemption. There's just crisis response. We wait until it's a problem that we cannot ignore, and then we're faced with it and we deal with it.
And that becomes a pattern, this delay. Right? So the inertia takes over and it becomes part of the DNA of the organization, and we can't act. We can't act preemptively and proactively, and we're always behind. We're always playing defense. So this is the first catastrophic consequence of a nice culture. Here's the second one. I can go through this one, Junior. Choked innovation. Niceness can suppress the courageous and divergent thinking required for innovation. You have to be courageous, and you have to bring divergent thinking to the table. What does this do? If it suppresses it, it creates an intellectual muzzle that can turn teams of highly talented people into dysfunctional groups. So here's the principle. Remember this: the early truth is kind. The late truth is unkind. If you muzzle people with niceness, they will reward you with the late truth. And that's unkind. No organization wants the late truth. We want the early truth. So can you see how we get choked innovation? Can you see how this becomes a catastrophic consequence of a dangerously nice culture?
Do you all see this? Do you see this in your teams and organizations? Does this resonate with you? Yeah, it looks like it way too often, you're saying. For sure. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's consequence number 2. Let's go to consequence number 3. Junior, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, this is one of my favorites. Bleeding talent. Not favorite because I like it, but favorite of the 5. It's interesting. Oppressively nice cultures drive A players away because A players can't be quiet. They are natural challengers. So not only will attrition go up, not only will you have increased turnover, but it happens in a particular segment of your organization, which is the top talent, because A players in many cases won't tolerate it. They're natural challengers. They want to dig in. They want to get in there and make things better. If they can't challenge the status quo, they will bounce. So think of the cost associated with this one as an organization. We can't afford to bleed out that top talent. We just can't. And the fact of the matter is, this is becoming increasingly an expected term of employment. People want to be able to, and especially in high talent, get in there and begin contributing, begin challenging out the gate. They don't want to wait for the stamp of approval from an organization that's given to them after 20 years tenure, where they say, okay, finally, now you have the ticket.
Yeah, you've finally earned your rights for participation, and you can finally challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
Your top talent take a look at the millennials, this massive cohort that's pouring into organizations today. The top millennials, as they go into organizations, do they have this mindset that, I have to pay my dues for 10 years before I can really put stuff on the table?
No.
There's no way. They're going to bounce. They're not going to hang around. They're going to call timeout, and they're going to say, wait a second, I came to contribute. And I may not know everything right now, but do you know what? I still can contribute something, and I want to be able to contribute as early as possible.
Yep.
So when we say catastrophic consequences, this is not an understatement. This is not hyperbole. Bleeding out your best talent is catastrophic, isn't it? Okay, let's go to the 4th catastrophic consequence of a dangerously nice culture. Junior, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. In a nice culture, the low tolerance for candor makes discussion and analysis for decision-making shallow and slow. Why is that? Why do you all think that the tolerance for candor, the low tolerance, makes it difficult? What do you think? I want to read some of your comments in here. You get an echo chamber in which the homogenization of thought gives you a flawed decision, or you conduct what seems to be endless rounds of discussion in the pursuit of consensus. Consensus is so dangerous. Eventually, you develop a chronically delayed response to almost everything. So let's go ahead and walk through a couple of these. Fiona says people give up. Douglas says you don't get honest answers and relevant info. Victoria, pushing for consensus. Let's just form a committee for that, says Antonia.
That's great.
I love that.
That's great.
Michelle,
That's great.
Fear of retaliation. Emil, truth is painful.
Yeah.
Sabrina says, I think COVID will bring these items to the surface. People have realized that they want something different in life. That's a very interesting comment. Thank you for bringing that up. Lack of divergent data. Cancel culture will shut you up. Nothing changes. It's like establishing forced confirmation bias. So if we don't have that ability to be candid, if the tolerance for candor is not high, that decision-making goes way down the velocity, and we don't get that diversity that we so need to find an optimal solution.
Yeah, that's so true. And again, does this not qualify as catastrophic?
Oh, it so does.
If this becomes a pattern in the organization, you'll put the very viability of the organization at risk.
Yep.
So these are not small consequences. They're massive. Okay, let's go to the 5th one, the last one, Junior. And that is learned helplessness. An invisible norm that imposes niceness, right? So when you've developed this nice culture, dangerously nice culture, it can induce conformity, passivity, and learned helplessness that lowers the bar of performance. At the individual level, this leads to frustration and an erosion of confidence, self-efficacy. I've stopped believing in myself and my skills and my abilities, and trust. And so this induces this state of learned helplessness. I become compliant. I become sluggish, right? And is this not catastrophic? Do you see this pattern? Do you see people acting this way? Any comments here, Junior?
Yeah. Christina says, I'm going through this right now and I'm trying to break free. Laura says, yes, in the school systems in the United States.
Yeah.
Jen says, it's such a waste of talent. Julia says, this is going down a dangerous slope for the employee and the employer eventually. I like the fact that she calls it out as a slope, because the consequences to each of these 5 things may not show up tomorrow. They may not even show up over the weekend or the next week or the next month, but over a long enough time horizon, the consequences will come, and they will come in full force. And so a lot of times, especially when we're talking about organizations churning out their top talent, really ingraining some of these patterns of decision-making, they bleed slow deaths, but the deaths become more and more close to inevitable the farther down the road we go in some of these behaviors.
Well, Junior, there's a compounding effect over time, right?
Certainly.
This reminds me of the character in Ernest Hemingway's book, The Sun Also Rises, when the one guy turns to him and says, so how did he go bankrupt? Gradually and then suddenly. That's what happens.
Isn't that how it almost always is?
Almost always how it happens. And with these catastrophic consequences, they start slow, but they gain momentum. There's a compounding effect over time. And then often you face a crisis, and you're fighting for your lives.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So Junior, let's pull down a polling question here, shall we?
Let's do it. So this polling question is, does your organization demonstrate any of the catastrophic consequences of a nice culture? Select all that apply. So these are the last 5 that we just talked about: delayed response, choked innovation, bleeding talent, low velocity decision-making, and learned helplessness. We're interested in seeing which of these you have experienced, so you can select more than one. If you're on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook, go ahead and put your top choice in the comments. We'll let this run for just a few more seconds. While this is running, I wanted to just plug the end of the webinar while I have a chance here. Stick around to the end, because we're going to be talking about the beta version of the online training for the 4 stages of psychological safety. You don't want to miss it, so stick around if you have the opportunity to. Okay, here we go. Let's go ahead and end the poll, and then I will share the results with you. This is very interesting.
Wow.
So we've got between 55 and 65% for every single one of these. So that's interesting, because if you chose one of these, chances are you chose multiple. That's what we're seeing in the data.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no clear winner either. The winner, low velocity decision making, is tied with delayed response. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it really is. But it just shows how pervasive these consequences are, and how often we see this. These are afflictions that most all of us have been through it in some degree or another.
I like some of the comments in the chat is that they're interlinked.
Yes.
That many times when you see 1 or 2 of these, you see all 5 of these.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't separate them, right? They bleed into each other.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into, so what do we do? So here we are. Maybe we have this affliction of a dangerously nice culture. What do we do? What are the remedies?
There's hope.
Yeah, there is hope.
There's hope.
So we have at least 4 that we've been able to identify that we think are very, very important ways to transform a dangerously nice culture. Here's the first one. Clarify expectations. So 3 things: expectations, standards of performance, and meeting types. Now, here's the principle. Ambiguity is the enemy. It preserves toxic niceness. And so we've got to get rid of that ambiguity. Clarifying anything will immediately begin to chip away at this ambiguity. Now, there are three things in particular where you do not want ambiguity. Expectations. So the expectations at an individual level based on your role and your responsibilities. Standards of performance. What are the standards of performance that we adhere to in the organization? Regardless of what it is that we deliver, what are the standards of performance? That needs to be clarified. Those need to be clarified. And then third, and this may sound a little bit odd to you, but meeting types. When you come together and you have a meeting, whether it's face-to-face or virtual or hybrid or whatever it is, what kind of meeting are you having? Is it clear what we're doing here? Type 1, we're coming to discuss and decide things. Well, then that needs to be clear. If we're having a discuss and decide meeting, let's make sure everybody knows that. Number 2, we're having an ideate and innovate meeting. We're getting together to talk, to be creative, to figure out solutions. And so we're going to ideate and we're going to innovate. Well, we need to be clear about that. And then maybe we come together and it is a team building opportunity. And we're here to connect and build rapport and invest in our relationships and get to know each other's stories. Well, that's a little bit of a different purpose, right? So we need to clarify meeting types. So these are three things in particular that need to be clarified. We need to chip away at that ambiguity. Ambiguity is the enemy that preserves toxic niceness. Junior, any comments?
Ambiguity has been such a killer for me in a few different scenarios. And I've found that as I've done these three things, not only does it help fight against that niceness culture, but it helps in so many different ways. So one of the things that I have done in the past that's been helpful to me, and I've seen other leaders do when I've been on their teams, is send out on the front end what the meeting agenda is, what the purpose is, and clarify the meeting type up front.
Yes.
And a lot of times I think that's particularly helpful if it's a meet and connect type meeting and just saying, hey, this meeting is just to give us a chance to get together for a few minutes and see how we're doing, get to know each other a little bit better. That's been especially helpful during the pandemic as we've been virtual.
Well, and how many meetings have you been to? And someone just pointed this out in the chat where you go to the meeting and there's no agenda.
Yeah. We're just here.
You're building in ambiguity deliberately, right? So think about how dangerous that is.
Yeah.
So clarify, let's chip away at that ambiguity. So that's number 1. Here's number 2. Junior, do you want to take this one up?
Publicly challenge the status quo that you helped create. Okay, so 2 parts here, and both are important. Publicly challenge the status quo, but also that you helped create. That qualifier is so important because it's very easy for all of us to point our fingers and challenge things that we don't like and say, this is wrong, this needs to be improved, I don't like this. But when we say openly in public, hey, I contributed to this status quo and I think that we can improve it. The subheading here, as a leader, you must be the first mover. Don't expect others to muscle through the fear and usher in a new era of truth telling if you hadn't modeled the behavior first. So pay extra close attention to this if you're in a position of power or title or authority, because people will model your behavior. So I would almost actively try to find a piece of the status quo that you don't like, that you helped create, and point it out. So be a little bit aggressive, be a little bit intentional in that regard. Do it next week. Say, hey, look, this is something that I helped build and we can improve it.
Yeah. And you got to go out of your way to find something, Junior, as you said, find something that you helped create. And then what do? You take away all of your ego defense mechanisms, you get rid of your pride of authorship, and you invite, so you first challenge the status quo that you helped create, and then you invite others to do it. And but you have to do that publicly.
You do. And Tim, another thing that I was thinking about over the last couple of days is many of us inherit the status quo. Many of us are in situations where everything in front of us has come down to us. So it may not always be the status quo that you helped create. It may be the status quo that you condoned, right?
Oh,
so
that's a good point.
That's an angle that I've been thinking a little bit about that might be helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Let's go to the third solution for removing a dangerously toxic culture. This one is give air cover for candor. Now, what does that mean? We're using a metaphor here. In a nice culture, people are afraid to speak up because they don't want to be seen as combative. Yet you desperately need access to dissenting views, desperately. So you shift the norm by giving air cover for their candor. In other words, you protect them in the vulnerable act of speaking candidly, even if their feedback or solutions are not of high quality. They need to be given a license to disagree and dissent, and you need to protect them in that behavior. That's what the air cover is. The air cover is the protection for that candor. That needs to become the norm, right? There has to be truth-telling in this organization, or we're on a slippery slope and things become more dangerous as we go along. Anything to add, Junior? Any comments?
I'm going through these comments in the chat, and we've got some good ones. Megan says, and you can know the status quo by empathizing with those who have no voice. I think that's interesting. I love it when my staff question the status quo. It reassures me that they're engaged. Yeah. Challenging status quo towards leaders that are not open to it, that's difficult. Oh, it certainly is. And a lot of this is difficult. Antoinette says, this would be a culture shift. Yep. In many cases, it will be.
That's right.
In many cases, it will be.
Yes. Yeah. It's not easy to do, but this is one of the most important norms that you can establish on a team or in an organization.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to number 4. This is our last recommendation. Junior, would you like to take this one?
Confront performance problems immediately. When you don't address a performance problem, your neglect or artificial niceness condones it. When you delay, you create confusion. I love this one. The immediate feedback is so important because I think it speaks to the ambiguity piece of things that we were talking about earlier. When you don't address it immediately, there's some ambiguity. It enters this gray area. So as soon as that happens, if we can be right on it, it will help so much to be clear and decrease the ambiguity and lay out, hey, this is really what I see is going on. And let's talk about it. Let's do something about it. Yeah. As you hold people accountable, do it privately and respectfully. Then patrol the boundaries of respect to ensure that others do it respectfully too. And one of the things that's helped me personally is when we talk about respect, we need to make sure and be so thoughtful about how we approach this and that it doesn't get personal. We're talking about performance, not people. People and their performance are two different things. The inherent value of a human doesn't go down because they're performing underneath their potential or beneath our expectations. We treat them human to human the same as we otherwise would. They deserve our respect and we deserve theirs. But performance problems, that is separate. And we can talk about it separately and clearly and be right to the point and do it immediately.
Mm-hmm. That's really true. So those are the 4. And so I want to summarize, and I think this is really this capsule summary statement that Martin Luther King made, I think gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. This is what he said. There is a type of constructive, nonviolent tension which is necessary for growth. Organizations have to have this in order to be successful. And so you can see how dangerous or toxic niceness, if that takes over our ability to debate issues on their merits and really have constructive dissent and creative abrasion and high tolerance for candor, we're not going to get there. So this is where we need to go. Can we actually do it? Yes, we can. So in the last minute here, I want to share with you the road, the path, the journey that takes us there. How do we get there? And this takes us back to 4 stages of psychological safety. Now, let me define psychological safety for you. Psychological safety is an environment of rewarded vulnerability. Now, think about that for a minute. An environment of rewarded vulnerability. That's what psychological safety is. Niceness may not be that at all. As we said at the beginning, niceness can be the veneer of civility, but it's not real. It's a fake collegiality, and we don't need that in our organizations. Okay, so let's talk about the 4 stages of psychological safety and how you get to a place where you can have this high tolerance for candor. Psychological safety is a combination of respect and permission. It's the fusion of these 2 dimensions. The first stage of psychological safety is inclusion safety. Inclusion safety means that you feel included, accepted, and you have a sense of belonging. This is the foundation. And the way that you create inclusion, deep inclusion in an organization, is that we apply a worth test to each other based on our common humanity. We never apply a worthiness test at stage 1, because then we come up with all of our own ideas about what worthiness means, and then we justify exclusion. It never works. So we apply a worth test to each other. We create inclusion. That's the foundation. Then we move to stage 2, which is learner safety. Learner safety means that I feel safe in the learning process. I can ask questions, give and receive feedback, experiment, even make mistakes. And I won't be marginalized or embarrassed or punished for doing that. In fact, I'll be supported and encouraged in that learning process. That's stage 2. And then we go to stage 3, which is contributor safety. Contributor safety means that I can take everything that I've learned in stage 2 and I can apply it to make a meaningful contribution, to make a difference, to carry my weight. And that's what most people want to do. They want to be able to make a difference. That's stage 3, contributor safety. Then we finally go to stage 4, the culminating stage, challenger safety. Challenger safety means that I can challenge the status quo without fear of retaliation or retribution, or putting my career on the line, or jeopardizing my standing or reputation. Challenger safety, this domain, this area of challenger safety, this is where we innovate. This is where we solve problems and create new solutions and make breakthroughs. Well, can you take this path? Can you progress through these stages with a dangerously nice culture? There's no way. The progression means that we build on a foundation of inclusion. We keep progressing. By the time we get to challenger safety, we do 2 things. We increase the intellectual friction on the team, and we keep the social friction down. And the way that the reason that we keep the social friction down is because the intellectual friction is our raw material to innovate and solve problems. So it's not about a superficial niceness. We need the ability to have hard-hitting dialogue so that we actually can solve problems. We need to be able to debate issues on their merits. The way that we're able to preserve that culture, that condition, is that we patrol, as Junior said, we patrol the boundaries of respect. We put away our ego defense mechanisms. We bring some humility to the task. We're open-minded and open-hearted. And then we're able to do that. We're able to spar with each other in a very healthy way. We're able to bring to bear all of our ideas, all of our abilities, and we can challenge. And what did we say? If top talent can't do that, and it's not just top talent, it's everyone. If we can't do that, then we're not going to stick around, because we need to be able to challenge. We can't really even, so you can see that these stages are connected with each other. But this is the universal pattern of the 4 stages that cuts through demographics and cultures all around the world. So I just wanted to mention that because that is how, if we take this journey, and the aspiration of every team should be to get to stage 4 Challenger safety, then we avoid the danger of a toxic, nice culture. Junior, anything that you'd like to add to that?
Just wanted to ask everyone that's attending, have you ever been in an environment where Challenger safety was high? What was that like? I want to hear some of the outcomes. What was that like for you, and what were you able to do when Challenger safety was high? Tim says it was amazing, awesome, humility. We were on fire. It was fantastic. Thanks, Charlotte. Yes, and it was incredible. I was able to do my best work, says Audrey. Melinda says, only with specific people, but I learned a ton. And I've seen that theme in the chat throughout the webinar, that there are pockets of this inside organizations.
Someone said it's so rare, but it's real and it's special.
Love that.
So it can be done.
It can be done.
Yeah.
It can be done. I know in my career, when I've been able to work in those situations, I've done my best work. I've learned the most and learned the fastest. And I've also had higher quality life experience elsewhere. Every component of life felt better. It's interesting how work bleeds into those other areas of your life. And if you're in a psychologically safe environment, man, what an amazing thing.
Yeah, really.
These are wonderful comments. So thank you everyone that's participating in the chat. So Tim, are we ready to talk a little bit more about the online training?
We're ready.
Okay. So if you found this last piece of the conversation interesting, if you've read the book but want a deeper dive, if you're interested in tooling up your credentials and all of the things related to psychological safety, please pay attention. I'm going to share my screen with you and walk you through one of the things that we are very excited to announce today. So we are launching the beta of the 4 stages of psychological safety online training, and we need your help. We've been working on this behind the scenes, and it is finally ready for you to look at. It's an online asynchronous video-based course aimed at individuals to teach psychological safety, to teach the 4 stages model and how to improve psychological safety at the individual level to improve your relationships and improve your teams. So we're going to be accepting 200 beta users to experience the product in its entirety and then provide feedback as to how we can improve. So this is the page that you'll see right here for the beta. LeaderFactor.com, you can go straight to the homepage and navigate to this item. You'll also see it linked in the chat and on social, and this will allow you to join the beta. So if you click join the beta, you will see a pop-up, first name, last name, phone, email, and the terms, and then you go to checkout. This is one of the biggest discounts we've ever given to any sort of training. It's $99 as we go through this beta version for the first 200 people. We're capping it so that we can get very specific feedback and engage directly with the people going through it so that we can tune up the product over the next month for its full launch, at which point the price will be $197. So it's a 50% discount while we get those first 200. You'll get a certificate of completion. It can help from a credential standpoint. So go to this page to learn a little bit more about what is included in the online training. One of the things I want to call out here is this section, Become a Better Human. Psychological safety is not just about work, it's about life. As you improve your relationships and your surrounding area, everything will improve. Your friends, your family, your significant relationships. This is not just about work, it is about life. So I wanted to take a couple minutes and walk you through the training itself. What actually goes on inside of the training? So there are several components inside the online training that I wanted to show you. The first is video. It's asynchronous video-based training. This is the biggest component, and it's led by Dr. Clark as our facilitator during the entire course. We have transcriptions of all of the videos. We have translation currently in Spanish. Other languages will be coming. We have concept reviews. We have module resources, so slides that you can download, transcripts of the videos, visuals that you can share on social and with your team. And then one of the coolest pieces about this is behavior selection. This is built into the training in a very interesting way. At the individual level, you will be choosing behaviors to work on over the next 30 days. You're going to be choosing one behavior for each stage and work on that for a single week. So after you go through, let's go to the 4 stages. If I go to inclusion safety, you'll see inside inclusion safety, I've got the video of the course. I've got the concept review, the resources. And then after this, I go into the behavioral selection. I'm going to choose one of the behaviors from this list that I personally am going to be working on over the next week inside that 30-day period. So I'm choosing one behavior for each of the stages. I submit my action plan, and then it triggers a really cool messaging campaign that you'll be receiving over that month-long period to remind you about the behaviors that you've selected, give you some tips and tricks, and then reflections at the end of each week to keep track of how you're doing and make some journal entries. So once again, LeaderFactor.com, the 4 stages online training. We're only accepting 200 spots during this beta period, and it's discounted down to $99. So please go ahead and reserve your spot. If you are a certified trainer, this is something that I want to talk about quickly. You inherit access to this. So if you've already been certified in the 4 stages, you will inherit access to this. No need to go and pay for the course. It will show up for you during the beta period beginning next week. So I think that is just about it. If you're interested in the certification, please go check it out on the website as well under certifications. You can go to the 4 stages cert and learn a little bit more about that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. What a session. This is one of my favorite topics because of the stakes. It's high stakes, and because of the practicality of the things that we can do to improve the situation. Psychological safety is a category that's it's not going away, and it has everything to do with our lives that we go through every day. So thank you for being part of this. We could definitely use your help during this beta period of the 4 stages online training. So if you're interested, please check it out. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And thank you for being interested in psychological safety. That's one of the things that we see every time we do a webinar. People who opt in to consume this type of content, to contribute to these types of events, they care. You care. You care about people, and we appreciate that. That's very much in line with who we are and what we do and why our organization exists. So with that, Tim, I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
Sure. To close us out today, everyone, Am I on? Am I on?
I can't hear you, but maybe it's me.
Can you guys hear? Oh, everybody can hear me. Okay, good. So I want to close out with a question. And this is a rhetorical question that I want you to think about. Did you know that you are a cultural architect? Now, I want you to think about that. Now, you may say, who, me? I'm the last person hired, or I don't have any title or position or authority or seniority or whatever. And I'm just going to say, time out, stop right there. You are a cultural architect. And the reason that you are is because you radiate influence to your colleagues every day, every hour, and every minute. You are modeling and reinforcing certain behavioral norms. The only question is, what norms are they? This is something that we need to think more about. You have a stewardship that is embedded in your role to be a cultural architect, even if you don't have positional power. Maybe you're in a technical role. Maybe you're an independent contributor. Maybe you're a contractor. Maybe you're a gig worker. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your contract status is. It doesn't matter what your positional power is. You are a cultural architect. So I leave that with you as a parting thought to ponder until we see you again. So thanks very much for spending this hour with us. And we hope you have an absolutely wonderful day and a great weekend.
You'll be receiving a recording of this entire session. So if you weren't able to catch the beginning, just know that you'll be able to watch that back, as well as a post-webinar email with the link to the online training beta. So if you didn't get a chance to look at it yet, know that that will be coming in an email. Thank you, everyone, again for tuning in, and please join us in the next webinar. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.